Hello guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so glad you're here. We're going to talk about something that is truly close to my heart, mainly because I was debilitated by these. I was living a life in survival, and it was the main catalyst for the reason that I do what I do now. So today we're going to be talking about intrusive thoughts in motherhood, and they can feel really scary. So firstly, I just want to open this conversation up with, if you're experiencing intrusive thoughts, just know that intrusive thoughts are not a mental illness in and of itself. So we have been fed a lot of misinformation, but the truth is 90 to 95% of parents will experience an intrusive thought. They are more common in the postpartum period. Why? Because our nervous systems are under so much pressure. So intrusive thoughts in and of themselves, while uncomfortable, aren't always an indicator of a mental illness. And I think that one of those things that we need to really lean in on is that the manifestation of an intrusive thought is actually a protector part of your body. It is not inherently bad. It is not something you wish to do. So in fact, it's something that is so far against your values and your ethos as a family that it scares the crap out of you, which is why they are so uncomfortable. Now, if you're someone who is experiencing intrusive thoughts over and over and over again, or maybe you're ruminating, or maybe you're experiencing symptoms of OCD, then that is something that you should always find support for, because it's not something that you have to live with forever. It is not an incurable disease. It is not a lifelong sentence. It is your body sending you a signal that it is not feeling safe. So that being said, let's jump in. Okay, so I guess it would be remiss to not talk about my experience with intrusive thoughts, and this is really personal. I shared a post on my Instagram a couple months ago and it blew up. However, there was a platform on TikTok where it blew up in the wrong way. So I was really vilified. There was a lot of people saying this is an intrusive thought. It's not, you can't help it. But there was a lot of people who didn't understand that. A lot of young people especially that really were outraged that I'd shared this particular intrusive thought. So I will let you check it out if you like to. I remember my first intrusive thought like it was yesterday. I just had my firstborn girl about 8 years ago, and I was changing her nappy, and all of a sudden I had this intrusive thought about harming her, and I was instantly terrified. And I just sort of changed her nappy, and then I was like, what was that? And at that time, I remember I was able to put it in oh, that was a really weird thought. I won't think about that ever again. But I went to see a GP at that time, and I remember my GP was kind of not sure what to do. She was a very young GP, and I could tell that she was erring on this side of I didn't give her the specific thought, but she was not really sure what was happening. And I went into a psychologist for maybe 3 or 4 weeks just because I was working as a nurse. I'd worked in the mental health space. I thought, oh, I'll just nip this in the bud. It's probably nothing. And I think I saw a psychologist for maybe 3 sessions, and then I felt fine again. And I continued on my postpartum journey, didn't have another thought at all. And then I fell pregnant with my second child in the pandemic. So in 2020, I had him, and at first it started off fine. I was so fine with having him and my daughter. We had him in the October, and I remember being okay, this is a lot, but it's doable. It's okay. And then I had a few family members. I had a fight with a family member. We'd moved house. There was a few life stresses happening. I remember one night I went to bed, and it was the night before we were meant to go down for a massive family Christmas party. And I went to bed and I woke up at about 3 a.m. having a panic attack. Now, I wasn't someone that was experiencing regular panic attacks. This was out of the norm for me, and I thought, something's not right. And I remember I woke my husband up because he came to check on me. I was just sitting on the shower floor, just trying to breathe through it. I didn't know that it was a panic attack at the time. It was just that terrified feeling. And he was okay, there's a lot going on. It's fine. Do you want to go tomorrow? And I went down to this family Christmas party anyway. And then I thought, no, I can feel within myself, this feels big. So I hadn't had any intrusive thoughts at that point. I had just experienced the one random panic attack. And anyway, the following week I saw a GP again, and I was no, I'm going to go back to a psychologist and I'm going to stick it out because I don't want to be terrified anymore. I don't want to have a random panic attack. So I got in to see a psychologist who was a beautiful person, and I will forever be thankful for her to opening up the lid to Pandora's box, even though at the time it felt horrendous. Now, I went into that first session to talk about that one random panic attack I'd had, and I left that session after she'd poked on one of my biggest pain points, which was my relationship with my father. And she poked that pain point and then sent me on my merry way. And as I got into the car, I felt this sense of terror and panic come on again. And I got into the car and drive home. And by the time I drove home, I was in the most debilitating OCD spiral I believe you can ever experience. And that lasted about a week. And over that week, it went from terror into intrusive thoughts. So being alone with my children, my husband being alone with my children, driving in the car, I couldn't stop picturing if I drove off the road. It was terrifying. Like, they were nonstop debilitating. And so I really fell into this OCD spiral, and I was so unsure and scared of myself. And this was about 8 weeks postpartum. And I couldn't understand at that time logically that the reason I was having these thoughts is because I had opened up a wound in talk therapy that was not addressing the feelings of unsafety in my body. So by opening up that wound and that pain point around some really painful stuff that had happened to me, I had sent my nervous system into overdrive. My nervous system couldn't cope with what was being opened, and so it thought, danger, 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 look for the danger. And sometimes your nervous system thinks that the danger is you, and it's not real. And it's just this voice within you, or this part of you that's trying to protect you and your babies, even though it doesn't feel like that. You are not your thoughts. Neuroscience says this. Psychology says this. Your thoughts are something that you witness. Okay. And that may not feel real. If you're in the thick of it right now and you're like, what do you mean they're not me? Your thoughts are just firing neurons that are being sent messages from your nervous system. So we're getting all this feedback, and your nervous system is constantly responding. And so if you are stressed, you'll notice that your intrusive thoughts are more likely to happen. And if you are calm, you'll notice that maybe you have a little bit of a break. Maybe the thoughts or the mean voice in your head goes away for a little while. And that's not by accident. And that's also not meaning to say that you need to try and avoid stress, because avoiding stress isn't super healthy either, but you need to learn to work with them. So let's define exactly what an intrusive thought is, okay? So they are sudden, unwanted, distressing thoughts or images flashing through your mind, okay? It is the opposite of your true values and who you are as a human. They are not intentions, desires, or true signs of danger, okay? So some examples that are socially acceptable are, what if I dropped my baby? What if I fell down the stairs carrying my baby? What if they just stop breathing? Okay, what if I lose control and harm my baby? Okay, we don't like to talk about the harm thoughts, because somewhere along the line, the system has mixed that up with psychosis. It has mixed that up with an inability to control. And I think it's also very taboo, okay? But intrusive thoughts can definitely be thoughts or images of harm to your baby by you or someone else. And they can be really, really horrible, okay? But when you take it from a lens of, my brain is trying to protect me, it can take a lot of the load off and actually calm your nervous system a little bit, because instead of going, oh, what was that thought? You suddenly recognize it as, I'm overwhelmed and that thought is trying to protect me, okay? So after birth, when we've just had a baby, your brain is shifting and evolving, okay? So your brain is shifting from viewing the outside world to like honing into you and your baby. And this is by design, and it is glorious, and it is yummy, and it is wonderful, but it is also making you hypervigilant, okay? So you are being so wired to protect your baby. Now that alongside sleep deprivation, so sleep lowers cortisol levels, and what are you getting the least of in the newborn period? Sleep. So your cortisol is staying high all the time. you have emotional shifts, you have hormonal shifts. There are massive things happening. Now, one thing that I would like to touch on as well is that the reason that some women are more anxious than others, or some women are more prone to experiencing these thoughts, is because of our background and our traumas. So if you are someone that maybe has experienced trauma and you weren't even aware of it, motherhood will reveal that to you. And sometimes that is in the form of intrusive thoughts or postnatal anxiety. Okay? So your nervous system is scanning for threats as it's meant to, and your intrusive thoughts that are coming through, they're like a misfiring of your nervous system. It's not that it's doing anything wrong, it's trying its best to protect you, but it's sending you a message. It's sending you a clear message, not that the thoughts are real and that you need to be worried, it's that you have stepped into overwhelm. And how can we fix that? How can we take some of the load off? How can we seek help and support? Most mothers never speak these thoughts aloud, and fathers. I would say fathers are probably more likely to not say anything, but most mothers will never ever speak these aloud because there is so much shame. And to share a personal story, I remember speaking with a nurse friend of mine who had experienced OCD, although at the time I hadn't realized that maybe she didn't realize that was OCD. And I remember saying to her, she shared that she had always worried that her baby had died in the car seat. And so she kept pulling over and checking the baby and pulling over and checking the baby. And I thought, wow, this is a really safe opportunity to share my thoughts. And I remember her look of shock on her face that I had shared something with her. And she was like, I am so amazed that they let you stay with your child. Now that is not a reflection on my friend. She said it out of fear. And the thing is with people who experience intrusive thoughts or postnatal anxiety, we live in a state of fear within our bodies. So we don't feel safe in the world. And so every little thing like that can make us feel like we are not safe and makes people react in that way. So be really mindful of who and where you give your energy, especially in this period. Now, my husband knows every thought that I have ever had because he is my safe space. I know that he knows that I am safe and he knows that I am safe. The stress cannot be enough on finding someone that is going to support you in an unbiased, calm way. It is the first time in your life that perhaps you feel like you need to get support, and that can be quite stigmatized in itself. But even recognizing your lack of ability to seek help could potentially be a wound that you can look at, because imagine if your child came to you and said, I need help, mummy, you would help them. Imagine if your best friend came to you and said, I need help, you would help them. The part of you that doesn't want to get help is exactly the reason you need to get help, exactly the reason you need to speak to someone. That protector part thinks that if you go and seek help, that it won't be there, that you'll be left feeling let down. This is the first step to recovery, is actually finding a trauma-informed person to speak to about this. Now, back to why the shame makes it worse, okay? So isolation for a woman in the postpartum period with a baby, it depends, what lens you believe and what you look down. I kind of believe in an anthropological sense that being alone with your baby in a house all day is well against nature's intention for women. Women do better in groups, we do better when we're socializing, and so that isolation, or especially that self-isolation, if you're experiencing intrusive thoughts, you may decide to, well, not even cognitively decide, but your nervous system may decide it's better to stay home today, or I won't go to that mother's group, or I can't stand to be in that room with those other children, or whatever it is. Just know that getting out and about is 100% going to do wonders for you. So you need to be putting yourself in rooms with other people, regardless of what's going on. Many women, because of the stigma of intrusive thoughts and the lack of understanding about what an intrusive thought is, are misdiagnosed with anxiety, with OCD, when truly having a weird thought, having an intrusive thought, is a part of being human. We've all had them. A lot of them are unspeakable, but just know that whatever it is, it has been thought before, okay? If they are non-stop, relentless, and they keep going, maybe that's crossed the bridge into needing some more support. But if it's just a one-off, If it's just the occasional, if it's just, I'm stressed, I'm having a weird thought, it is okay to see it as that and act accordingly, which is you don't need to do anything about it. You need to look after yourself. You need to get support. It's not always a sign that there is something wrong. And I noticed that every time I would go to therapy, my intrusive thoughts would ramp up after every single session. But I kept going for about 8 or 9 months, and I stopped the sessions. Felt like I'd, covered what I needed to, but I was trying to go back into my everyday life, and it was really hard because I would have intrusive thoughts randomly. Like we would be at the aquarium and I'd randomly have one, or I'd just be relaxing and I'd randomly have one. And it became like I became on edge from being alone or within my body. So I was constantly on go mode. I was running from myself constantly. And it ended up feeling like I couldn't ever just sit and relax, because if I sat and relaxed, it would be long enough to bring the thoughts on. Now, the issue with attacking it like that and the lack of understanding within the talk therapy world is that we're not actually addressing the lack of safety in the body, which is causing the thoughts in the first way. So if you're someone who has experienced them, or maybe you're struggling with OCD and you're trying to run from them, eventually you'll have to stop and sit with the discomfort of being with the thought. And so what that does is when you notice the thought, but separate yourself from it, you are not your thoughts, you can see it as a wise witness, okay? So I remember distinctly the moment that this landed for me. So I had been practicing separating myself from my thoughts for about just over a year. And we'd gone on a holiday to New Zealand, and I was pregnant with my third. And I'd struggled the first week of our holiday, and I'd gotten more and more tense. Like we were traveling, there was one night where we all got really sick, like it was full on. And I remember having these thoughts that they came up, and I was like, oh my God, like I don't want them, and I started to try and reject the thoughts. So I started to try and push them away. And what that did was send my nervous system a message that I was not safe with the thoughts, and it starts to ramp up, it starts to escalate until you're in a freeze state and you're like, I just can't get away from the thoughts. And then all of a sudden it landed. I was able to see that the thought itself was something that I was witnessing and that I was not an active part of. Now, immediately I started to shift the way I was interacting with these thoughts. So instead of seeing the thought and being like, I don't want to have that thought, and leaning back, I had the thought and I thought, okay, I see you're scared. It's okay to be scared right now. I would interact with it without giving it time. So the more that I was able to do that, the more I got into practice, the less and less intrusive thoughts that I had. So by the time my baby was born, and certainly in her postpartum, there was the odd intrusive thought, but it went from in situations that I was really stressed, having a lot, to having nearly none. And 5 years on from when I started my therapy journey and my awakening journey, it is incredibly rare that these happen, incredibly rare. Now, if you are trying to separate yourself from your thoughts, just know that your protector part, the part that is making these thoughts, is going to step in and be like, oh no, you really don't understand. No, you don't get it. Like you need to think about this, like this is a threat. And it's going to take radical compassion for that part of you that is trying to keep you safe, because it's going to want to pull you back into having the thoughts to keep you safe. It's how it has learnt to keep you safe. So when you are trying to separate from your thoughts, don't expect it to be like, oh, I can separate from my thoughts immediately. Maybe that will land from this video, but eventually it starts to click to our cognitive mind that our intrusive thoughts that are coming from the primitive part of our brain aren't actually a threat, and that we can witness them in the same way that we do witness a scared child. We don't join a child in chaos when they're having a tantrum. We try and stay calm and become the witness to them. So it's the exact same way when we're trying to acknowledge or work with intrusive thoughts. When to seek support and when to put your hand up and say, this is not just something that I can move through and acknowledge, okay? So if they are constant and if they are affecting your ability to enjoy silence and stillness, then that is something that your nervous system needs to be worked on. Your state of calm needs to improve when you are alone, and that is called safety within your body. So where do we go? So I believe that the system here in Australia, you can go and see someone in the public system, you can go and see a psychologist. It is really a matter of seeking out someone. Speaking from my personal experience and beliefs, you have to find someone that is trauma informed. Not every person on the planet that works in mental health is trauma informed. You need to find someone that is working on safety within your body to restore that sense of, I'm okay, I trust myself. That is how you really build from the ground up. That is how you really work away from having intrusive thoughts as a form of protection, because you know that you don't need that to protect you anymore. You have trust and faith within your body. One thing that I really want to close on is, that intrusive thoughts don't make you a bad mom, don't make you a bad dad. Intrusive thoughts, again, I'm going to say the statistic, and I feel like it's really important that it lands. 90 to 95% of new parents experience intrusive thought. Now, I would argue that that's probably much higher than in previous generations, because the expectations on parents today are so huge. At no other time in history, let that land, no other time in human history have we been expected to do what we do now and parent. We have isolated ourselves from villages. We are working with a brain that was designed to be eating berries in a cave. That is what we're working with. We've got iPhones and AI and Instagram and pressure and our societal conditioning. We're trying to deal with that and be loving, conscious parents. Now, having an intrusive thought is not a weakness. It is not a mental illness in itself. It is not something that makes you lesser than, but it is always a sign and a messenger from your body that you are overwhelmed, that you need to find a way of finding an outlet for your stress, whether that be exercise, meditation, breath work, journaling, stillness, whether that is a sign that perhaps you're suppressing your emotions and you're not dealing with things. It is always a message and never a punishment. Intrusive thoughts are not here to punish you. They are here to keep you safe. Your brain believes that it is protecting you and your baby. So in a radical way, thank them. Thank that message. Thank those thoughts for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I see what you're trying to do. I am safe, and let it go. And you won't let it go straight away, but with practice and time, you will. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful. As someone that has journeyed through 5 years of the work, the inner work, the unpacking everything and rebuilding who I am today, I want to just really come in as an advocate for women, especially in new motherhood. Thank you for being here. Please click subscribe if you resonated or if you're in the new motherhood, and like this video because it really helps me. But otherwise, talk soon.